Today's story took place in 2018 in the Netherlands. Doni Odegaard, a resident of the U.S. state of Minnesota, was greatly alarmed when she saw a police officer at her doorstep. A terrible sense of déjà vu overcame her at that moment and mentally transported her back 3 years. She immediately realized the policeman's visit was connected to her 21-year-old daughter, Sarah. Sarah Pappenheim was born January 30th, 1997, in Minnesota. She was the second child of her parents, Doni Odegaard and Jerry Pappenheim. The oldest child in their family was Josh. He and Sarah were very friendly, and the close bond between them became stronger as they grew older. When Sarah was in second grade, her family moved from Minneapolis to Redding, California. She graduated from Foothill High School in 2015, where, in addition to her studies, she was a member of the school band in which she played the drums. Music in general, and drums in particular, were Sarah's personal passion. She was an accomplished drummer and often played in weekly jam sessions at Redding's venues. Not only did Sarah stand out for her drumming skills, but she was one of the few female drummers appearing on stage. At the age of 18, Sarah returned to her native Minnesota with her mother and brother. By this time, her parents were divorced. She went on to play drums at various venues in Minnesota, and one day music brought her together with famous blues guitarist and singer Bernard Allison. He was impressed with Sarah's performance, and she began to occasionally take part in his concerts. By the age of 19, the girl had become a local celebrity among blues fans, and because of her stunning, wide smile, Sarah was nicknamed Ronald McDonald. The divorce of his parents hurt Josh greatly. He had been struggling with depression and mental health problems for the past few years. No one close to the guy at the time could have imagined how it would all end. It was February 2016, on a seemingly unremarkable day. Doni heard a knock on the door, and when she opened it, she saw police officers on the doorstep asking who she was to Josh Pappenheim. The woman replied that she was his mother, whereupon the officers sadly told her the news that divided her life into before and after. At the age of 20, Josh took his own life. His passing was a heavy blow to his loved ones. As Doni would later recall, she cried so much that her tear ducts dried up. Her message under Josh's obituary still survives, in which she promises to love her son forever. Sarah and Josh were very close. She was devastated by his departure, and also the fact that her brother had voluntarily passed away. Rather than let the pain consume her, Sarah decided to study psychology to help people with mental health problems in the future. She had long been in contact with a guy named Nico Karsemajer. The guy lived in the Netherlands, and Sarah decided to go there. She enrolled at Erasmus University in Rotterdam, where she began to study psychology. Nico helped Sarah go through the loss of her brother, helped her with her studies, and generally, as a native speaker, helped her in any way he could. Although Sarah immersed herself in her studies and work, her love of music never disappeared. She wrote to Bernard Allison, with whom she had once performed on the same stage and whom she maintained a friendship with, that she had almost saved up the money to buy the drum kit she had dreamed of for so long. In January 2017, Bernard Allison, along with his band, toured Europe. On January 30th, her 20th birthday, Sarah came with Nico to Allison's performance in Germany, and as soon as Bernard spotted her, he immediately called her to the stage. After wishing her a happy birthday, he invited Sarah to sit at the drum kit and take part in a performance, just like in the good old days. This recording was made on that very day.
I know I'm black and she's white, but we come from the same background.
In Rotterdam, Sarah lived on the third floor in a complex just a mile from the university. 2018 was coming to an end, and she wanted to spend Christmas at home in the United States. Her flight was supposed to take place about a week before New Year's Eve. However, on December 12th, everything changed. Doni Odegaard saw a police officer on her doorstep, just as she did in 2016 when her son passed away. When the officer began asking her about her daughter, the woman's legs began to shake. She knew in her heart what she was being told, and at the same time, she couldn't believe it had happened to her again. When the officer was convinced that Sarah Poppenheim's mother was before him, he sadly informed her that her daughter had passed away. After these words, Doni lost consciousness. She had 2 children. Her son was gone when he was 20 years old, and now she had lost her daughter as well. Sarah was 21 years old. As previously stated, the girl lived in a complex on the 3rd floor, with the vast majority of the people living there being students. For the past year, Sarah had rented an apartment there, and she shared it with another student, also a musician who played the double bass. Like Sarah, Joel Schelling was a talented musician, and music was their meeting point. Sarah was a very outgoing, always smiling person, which could not be said of her roommate. Joel's only friend was Sarah, and even though he had a temper and occasionally quarreled with her, Sarah didn't want to leave him alone with his problems and moved to another apartment because she remembered what had happened to her brother. She told her mother that she could always calm Joel down when he got mad at someone. However, as time passed, the situation began to deteriorate. 6 days before she passed away, Sarah wrote to her friend Adam Pryor in Wisconsin that she was afraid of her roommate because he had told her he was going to physically eliminate 3 people whom he didn't like. "I have to go to the police," Sarah wrote. A couple of days before her passing, Sarah had spoken to her mother on the phone and also told her that her roommate's behavior was bothering her more and more. Doni told her daughter to look for another place to live immediately and, until she moved out, to try to stay as far away from Joel as possible. On Wednesday, December 12, 2018, at 12:20 p.m., Sarah and Joel's next-door neighbors called the police after hearing them fighting loudly, and then Sarah screaming in horror. When the police arrived and entered the apartment, they found Sarah lying unconscious on the floor, with multiple stab wounds all over her body. Attempts to resuscitate her were unfortunately unsuccessful, and she passed away. Her roommate was not there. Apparently, he had run away, and the police started looking for him. Interviewing neighbors on the same floor, officers learned that Joel Schelling had left the apartment in a hurry, taking a double bass with him. This musical instrument is of an imposing size, and so it became a special feature in the description sent out. Less than 2 hours after the crime was committed, 23-year-old Joel Schelling was arrested at Eindhoven train station, about 60 miles from Rotterdam. His parents lived in Eindhoven, and he was on his way to visit them. He called his mother while on the train and confessed to her that he had taken Sarah's life. The judge placed him under arrest for 14 days. During that time, it was to be determined whether Schelling suffered from mental disorders. The forensic experts who conducted the autopsy counted 27 stab wounds on Sarah's body, several of which were in the neck, abdomen, and back. 2 days after her daughter passed away, Doni Odegaard traveled to the Netherlands. She had to decide on the return of Sarah's body to her home country. $40,000 had to be raised, and the family was helped in this endeavor by people who cared for them. The first thing Doni tried to find out was whether Sarah had gone to the police to report that her roommate was going to attack 3 people. As it turned out, Sarah had not contacted law enforcement. However, she did contact social workers who help people with psychological difficulties. The social workers paid Schelling a visit, and they got the impression that he was normal as he answered all the questions and was calm and straightforward. On the following day, Sarah was again forced to contact social services. The reason for this was that Schelling, in a fit of anger, began to beat himself with a hammer and said that he would soon have to do away with several people. Sarah was afraid that Joel would find out that she was the one who had sent the social workers to ask him. The specialists did not have time to respond to Sarah's second request, as she had already passed away. Schelling was accused of causing Sarah Poppenheim's passing. He admitted his guilt, but said he did not remember taking her life. According to him, he remembered how they began to fight, and then when he came to, he was already in the shower cleaning himself. The hearing in the case began in March 2019. Sarah's mother, Doni Odegaard, flew to each hearing, where she could only understand what the participants were saying with the help of an interpreter. At the trial, Schelling stated that he suffered from delirium and heard voices in his head. When the judge asked him if the voices had ordered him to fight with Sarah, he replied that he did not know and could not remember. He also said he did not remember what he and Sarah began fighting about. Before the verdict was announced in December 2019, experts said Schelling suffered from various disorders and needed long-term treatment, and at the same time they concluded that he should be held responsible for taking Sarah Pappenheim's life. The medics reasoned that Schelling remembered the beginning of the fight and scuffle with Sarah and could have made a choice to stop or to grab the knife. He chose the latter and should be punished. The prosecutor demanded 10 years in prison for the defendant, but the judge in Rotterdam sentenced Schelling to 6 years in prison, followed by indefinite imprisonment in a psychiatric hospital. The court went on to explain that it rejected the prosecution's argument for 10 years in prison because of the suspect's relatively young age and his extreme diminished capacity when he took the victim's life. The suspect can therefore not be fully blamed for the proven fact. Upon sentencing, the court released a detailed statement explaining that, considering the severity and unpredictability of the crime, as well as the serious psychological disorders of the suspect, the court deems recidivism of a violent crime very likely. The suspect suffers from chronic disorders that require prolonged treatment and guidance in a clinical setting. It characterized the psychiatric detention as a punitive measure for Schelling, who has said he's willing to participate in treatment for depression and other disorders. He will remain held under treatment until the court, which will review his status every 2 years, determines he is well enough to be released. The court also ordered Schelling to pay €68,700 in compensation to Sarah's family. Doni Odegaard was furious at the sentence, saying, "This is not justice." She was expecting a minimum of 10 years. In America, the woman said, Schelling would have faced life imprisonment or capital punishment so that he would never have the opportunity to do something like this again. She also expressed concern that after just 4 years, Schelling could be released from prison on parole, promising to do everything in her power to keep him behind bars as long as possible. There was also an investigation into the social workers Sarah had called in. It was concluded that they could not be blamed because they were not competent enough to determine the disorders that Schelling was diagnosed with.